79 years, it stood as the central landmark of the Mississippi State campus. Begun in the year Mississippi A&M first opened its doors, it was here from the beginning. It is with us still, if only in memories that refuse to die. It was Old Main. Built in stages starting in 1880, it had grown by the early 1920s to its full and final size, more than 500 rooms, accommodating more than 1,500 students. It was claimed to be the largest dormitory under one roof anywhere in the country. In all, over the course of 4 generations, an estimated 40,000 men of Mississippi A&M and Mississippi State learned to call it home. The story of Mississippi State's most famous building will be fully told for the first time and preserved for all time in a forthcoming volume by history professors Charles Lowry and Roy Scott. The book is Old Main, Images of a Legend.
I would estimate we got 100 different stories. Not just stories, but experiences. What it was like to be a student here in the 20s or the 30s, the first impressions of students upon coming to the campus, what dormitory life was like, characters, personalities. All of that is a part of the response that we got.
Old Main was never known for its comforts. The original building, like the rest of the campus, lacked indoor plumbing. But students who felt the need of a bath were welcome to carry water from the cistern and heat it over the coal-burning fireplaces in their rooms. As the years passed, indoor toilets replaced what were politely called dry air closets. The fireplaces were sealed with the coming of steam heat, and kerosene lamps gave way to electricity. Old Main, after numerous modifications and additions, finally measured about 375 feet by 266 feet. The open interior quadrangle was almost the size of a football field. The large Gothic-style cafeteria, now Perry Hall, was built in 1922, just a few convenient steps to the west of Old Main. Just to the north of the dormitory, residents gathered for conversation at the famous Bull Ring, where many tall tales were told and embellished. Early life in Old Main was Spartan by today's standards, in keeping with the military character of the early institution. Students awoke to reveille, wore uniforms, marched to and from class, and lived under military discipline. Most of the time, anyway. Inevitably, times changed. Women were admitted in 1930 for the first time in significant numbers, and after a complete absence during the previous 18 years. Uniforms and the other trappings of military life gradually faded. Rooms took on a more homey atmosphere, although housekeeping standards may have declined. Private business enterprises of various types, although not officially sanctioned, flourished within Old Main. Eventually, the rowdiness and hijinks of Old Main residents grew legendary. Hazing of freshmen was a fact of college life, but there was much more. Water fights with fire hoses could grow to massive proportions, resulting in flooded rooms and turning stairways into cascades. On at least one occasion, a section of the extended hallways was dammed and used for canoe races. From 1931 until the late 40s, Major I.D. Sessoms, a former commandant of cadets, was responsible for maintaining discipline and order in Old Main, although he often fought a losing battle in the face of overwhelming odds.
Fires were a common feature of dormitory life after the dropping of military discipline about 1931-32. Students routinely would dump their waste paper into the hall, set it afire, go about their way. And that was a provocation to bring out the fire hoses. Each section of the dorm, of which there were 9 or 10, had its own fire hose. And so the students would get the fire hoses out to put out the fire, and then, of course, would turn into general free-for-all. One of the episodes in particular I remember was one involving a student who happened to be taking a shop class, and by virtue of that had a brace and bit in his room. Students had fired his door, and then got the hose and hosed it down and flooded his room in the process. And he was standing ankle deep in the water, grabbed his brace and bit, started drilling a hole in the floor. And Major Sessoms came along. Major Sessoms was the equivalent of the Dean of Men at the time, and said, "Young man, what do you suppose you're doing?" And without looking up to see who it was, he said, "Why, you dang fool, what does it look like? I'm drilling a hole in the floor to let this water out."
As colorful as their pastimes often were, the residents of Old Main apparently did manage to study. Many who first entered the sprawling dormitory as boys left it as men. Some went on to fight their country's battles. All of them carried with them memories of a place that played an important part of their lives.
At Old Main symbolized, it became almost a mother figure. We were nurturing and protecting them during their formative years when they were getting that education and preparing for life.
As the campus grew up around it, Old Main endured and dominated its surroundings. The huge building occupied what is now the site of Calvert Union and stretched well onto the site of present-day McCool Hall. So it was until the early morning hours of January 23, 1959, when disaster struck. Old Main, which had survived countless smaller fires within its walls, succumbed to this one. The blaze, which began between the 3rd and 4th floors in the northwest section, apparently was caused by faulty wiring. It was exam week, and many students had already left for home, but 900 remained. Soon they spilled out onto the drill field and watched as a landmark passed into history. One student who escaped, then returned to his room to collect more belongings, was the single fatality. By morning, only the columns of the front facade, broken sections of walls, and mountains of smoldering rubble remained. Old Main has been gone for 35 years, yet it lives on. Brick salvaged from its ruins helped build the Chapel of Memories. It lives on, too, in the memories of the thousands who shaped its legend. It lives on in the stories they tell. It lives on in the spirit and tradition of a great university.
Old Main symbolizes much of what is great in Mississippi State history. It reminds us of friendships born and nurtured on this campus, and lessons learned in youth that last for a lifetime. Stories of its past remind us also that the future is in our hands. That's why the Mississippi State Foundation recently created the Old Main Society. Members will be those who choose to make the university a primary beneficiary of their estate. Their generosity now will help ensure that Mississippi State's quality endures long into the future. This society encourages unrestricted bequests. A portion of such testamentary gifts not designated for a particular purpose will be used to restore monuments and historic structures on campus and otherwise maintain university traditions. Members of the Old Main Society will make Mississippi State stronger today and tomorrow, and they will help ensure that the best of yesterday as well lives on in their university.